This brisk autumn morning. We're 1 week away from Turkey Day. I get to smoke a bird on the green egg this year, so I'm excited for that. We're going to move the approval of the minutes to the end of the meeting, and we're going to start the agenda, a full slate to discuss. We'll start off by acknowledging, I'm sure the headline that everyone saw, that Ryan Toohill has moved on to take on economic development for the city of Phoenix. We thank him for his leadership and wish him the best in his new role. And very excited to have Kate Angie as the acting director. We are in very steady hands and excited to have her keep this ship steady for us in the interim. We have a very full agenda. We have 80 staff giving us an update on arts and placemaking and how it fits into economic development. One of the things that I found really interesting when I first started getting involved with economic development was that Arlington County very strategically put arts under economic development, which I think is a great place for it to be, and we'll have a better understanding for how it all fits together. And on that related theme, we have our fellow commissioner, Sarah Barker, leading a panel discussion on the performing arts with guests from Theater Washington, which I will let her introduce later on. And then we'll have some quick updates from Commissioner Weinstein on the comprehensive plan and Commissioner Pritchard on the transportation advisory group. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kate for your report.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. Happy to be in this seat. A little surprised at Ryan's departure, but I think as a testament to his leadership and the solidness of our leadership team, we are charging ahead, not missing a beat. So I look forward to working with all of you. So real quick, only a few slides here today. I guess we'll start with our economic indicators, which you guys keep seeing. Go to the next slide. I think the best news of last week is we have a open government again. As you all know, we've got about 25,000 residents in Arlington that work for the federal government. So that is a welcome relief of some financial pressure for sure. Unemployment, though, has held steady since August. So we're at 3.5%, which is, again, up from this time last year, but holding steady for the moment. We're also holding steady with office vacancy. There's been no change, and this is a really solid indicator. Again, we saw a slight dip in vacancy this year, which is a really solid sign, given that we've been trending increasing in our vacancy for the last several years. The biggest challenge, though, in the short term continues to be our hotel sector, and we're really seeing a drop and decline there. The federal government shutdown really did give them a double whammy hit. It's been very hard, and so we've seen their numbers really drop precipitously, down from 74% in terms of occupancy in September. So that's going to be another area where we just have to, hold steady and keep pushing forward and supporting them. We go to the next slide. So what are we working on? You guys keep seeing this table of things. The few that I want to point out, as I just mentioned, given the challenges in our tourism sector, we continue to work towards tourism promotion, long-term funding. So we all talked about the Tourism Improvement District effort last time and probably over the last year. We are now working in partnership with our stakeholder community to look at that enabling legislation, and in this year's legislative session, looking to change that law to enable us to work in the way that we've all envisioned we want to work. So fingers crossed on that. That will be moving forward in the next several months. We are also moving forward with the Innovation District. I think you've heard a little bit about this. There'll be a more public announcement coming, but this is really an investment between the public and the private sector to say, how do we really strengthen the innovation ecosystem in the National Landing area, but writ large across the county? So more to come on that. You're going to hear today about the arts. We're excited that the new CAD campus, this is down on 4 Mile Run, 3700, is really growing into a hub of activity. And our acting director, Josh Stolfus, is going to talk to us about that. If we go to the next slide, a couple other things. CMRI continues to move forward. We've got some good report outs on our adaptive reuse progress, but right now, one of the big things is the update to the sign ordinance. Many of you, if you're involved with any organization, hopefully you've heard from somebody from the county asking you for your thoughts. And if you haven't, please let me know so we can make sure you get a briefing and you can weigh in on that big initiative. We are also underway in selecting a consultant to do a small business survey. This will be the first time we've done this. I think possibly in a very long time, where we're going to actually poll the small business community and kind of say, are we meeting your needs? What are your challenges? And how do we continue to strengthen our program to meet your needs? So that'll kick off in early next year. I think that's all I want to highlight for today, because we're going to talk more about the arts in the presentations. So we go to the next slide. This is one of my favorite slides right now, because as you can see, we've had 5 applications, which is impacting 7 buildings since we adopted the adaptive reuse policy just under a year ago. That's pretty significant. We are inching towards almost 2 million square feet of office that is coming offline and going to another use. Bravo to all of you that have been involved in this every step of the way, but this is really good, I think, indicator of success and says we're moving in the right direction. Next slide. Couple of other things to note over the last month, 2 on the tech side of things. So we co-led the region's largest tech event, which is DC Startup and Tech Week. About 15,000 or 1,500 people attended. This is becoming a go-to and really well-supported event on the East Coast. So it was another successful year for that in early November. We also partner with GMU. Paula Sorrell is on the call today. This is one of her big visionary sort of events. This is the 5th year that we did the Accelerate Investor Conference. The great news is one of our very own Arlington startup companies, whose name I'm going to forget, but I think it's they basically won the pitch event, and that's pretty exciting because, let me get their name correct, Electro Tempo, thank you. They are in the EV business, so it's really exciting because they won that $50,000 equity investment at this competition, so good news on that front. We also hosted again the 50th Marine Corps Marathon, which actually was a big boost to our local hotel industry. There were 4,000 runners here, so that was a very successful event. And on the small business front, we celebrated Hispanic Heritage Month. And for those of you that maybe were able to attend, we spotlighted the co-owner and founder of District Taco, which is just a very inspiring story of kind of that entrepreneurial American dream from an immigrant perspective. We are also mobilizing right now to prepare for Small Business Saturday on November 29th, and that's a big small business push. We're partnering with the Chamber, we're partnering with our bids and partnerships to get the word out, and we're doubling what are known as open rewards, which is essentially a rewards program to shop local. And lastly, we are out and about talking about, again, the continued urgency for bold thinking to enable commercial development. So keep building on our success and momentum. The Chamber hosted an economic development focus this month. We've spoken at the CivFed, and then there was a ULI Washington advisory panel where we also participated. So again, we keep wanting to make people remember that we are still in a bit of a crisis on commercial development and what can we keep doing to move that forward. Next slide. What I'm excited to talk about today is that this is going to be a discussion about the arts. The whole agenda is, really focused on why invest in the arts, what does the arts ecosystem look like in Arlington and in our region, and why is it so important? AED and the county is just one player in this larger, though, ecosystem. What we do is we have the Cultural Affairs Division, which is known as CAD, and you're going to hear from Josh, our acting director, kind of what their focus is. But we also do urban placemaking, public art, and we work very closely with our bids and partnerships on that urban placemaking set of activities. We also do an annual grants program, which I think you all are aware of. This past year, we did a pilot program, which was we awarded 2 placemaking grants. So these are direct grants to arts organizations and artists in our community. So those are some of the big things that we're doing. One thing I think we've also been talking a lot about as a key part of our strategic plan is the recognition that the arts are part of economic development. So how can we keep investing? How can we keep leveraging the partnerships with our other folks in the community that are invested in the art and make sure that it helps to bolster our creative industries, helps drive foot traffic, and helps actually on the tourism front as well. So I'm happy that others will talk a lot about this today. So with that, I think we move on. Thank you all.
Kate, Angie, off to a hot start. Meredith, you had a question?
Yeah, you have.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kate. Very helpful, and I always love seeing the indicators and tracking with them. Do we have small business indicators that we're looking at? I'd love to just spend a few minutes on that. Government shutdown aside, inflation is a very real thing, and just would love to hear your thoughts on what we're seeing.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot of anecdotal stories of a lot of pain. I'm not going to lie, and I think that that's it. It really is the fact that costs keep increasing and the operating costs are not decreasing, and a lot of folks are getting pinched. I know the chamber and Tara's here, I think.
Yes.
She's here, are doing a lot right now to just keep their hands on the pulse. We don't have any new data to share on that, but that's something we will continue to watch and come back to you all with some updates when we have it.
Great, thank you. I have a second question, but I'm going to go to, I don't know if Kate had.
Sure. I mean, I would just add that, again, and Tara is the expert on all things small business. Arlington and the county has much better data than we do. But again, combination between data and anecdotes that, again, we had our Arlington Restaurant Week in October, and we had almost 100 restaurants that were participating. Leading up to that, 3 restaurants announced closures in Arlington, which is, again, it's a high turnover industry, but much higher than usual. But with working directly with the restaurants, a number of them have told us that things are worse for them right now, sales wise, than were during COVID. One offered to bring me in the back and show me his books, which is a very interesting offer, but another meeting to go to. So they got a nice little boost from that week, but again, it's not, enough to keep them going in perpetuity. So a lot of our messaging has been around that. We turned some media again, of course, with the federal shutdown, people think about, again, our friends in the federal government and the contractors, but you're absolutely right, Meredith, that it's carrying over to anything that's discretionary spending. So that's really restaurants, it's small businesses, it's personal services, it's hair, nails, all of those things. And again, it's the businesses, but it's also the individuals who work at those businesses as well. Again, especially in the restaurants, when you look at kind of a whole other conversation about tipped wages, but those individuals where if they're not getting the same number of tables, or again, I think it was Pirouette before they closed that said that, somebody used to order, wine and an appetizer and entrees. Now they're just maybe getting an app and a glass of wine. That what that does, not only for the business, but the individuals there. So yes, this is absolutely still very real. And even with the shutdown ending, with all of the other economic concerns in our community, small business support remains paramount. That's why Tara and her team have some great things planned to do as much as we can.
And the meals tax.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked extensively last year about the meals tax again, and this was not intended to be a we told you so, but I mean, this is exactly what we were concerned about. Was with all this timing, it's the worst possible time to be adding another burden onto the restaurants right now.
That's very helpful, and I'll follow up with you. Would you like to share a bit?
Oh, sure. We are seeing an uptick in the one-on-one consultations of people that are coming in that need help, or they're looking to start a business. So it's kind of like an interesting dichotomy. Like when the government shut down, we had more people interested in starting businesses from the federal side, and they did. And they used their expertise, or they went into doing food. But then we're also seeing a lot of pain around the tariffs and purchasing and buying. And that's why we decided to really go full in Small Business Saturday and offer the 5% on top of the 5%. And then like our friends in Boston are going to add another 5%. So it's like 15% off, if you shop local, because we're trying to do everything to make sure that people are supporting our local businesses, particularly now as a lot of the consumers are pushing back and not spending or spending in different ways. So we're trying to figure that out and still working with our consulting program to help people do a deeper dive, to pivot or to re-strategize what they're doing. So we're kind of like right in the trenches, hoping to be able to respond to the most imminent needs. But we also had Dr. Keith Waters come in from GMU. He works with Dr. Close and talk about the DMV and the economy and the restaurant industry, the different industries and the push-pull. And he said it's tough right now looking at all the numbers and the stats. He said, however, he thinks in about a year or so, things will really start to stabilize and normalize and kind of like we could see a little bit of light. It was a very heavy message. It wasn't the all, sweet. Things are really, really tough and they're going to be tough for a while, but there is an end in sight. They're predicting. So I can also share those stats with the EDC as well. Yes, thanks so much.
Thank you for the good discussion. We will keep moving down the agenda. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Sarah Barker. And
Are we gonna
I'm sorry. Yeah, I skipped an agenda item. So we're going to have Josh walk through economic development, arts and placemaking for the county.
Thank you. Microphone over here. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I was talking to Mary Margaret, and I think it's maybe a year or two or maybe 10. We couldn't actually figure out that I was here last. So appreciate the opportunity to come back. And one of the things, Kate had asked me to give just a brief overview of what we do just to set the table, but then also speak to some of the new initiatives that we have. And I think that one of the things that I hear probably more often than I would like is, I didn't know you did all of that. Talking about the Cultural Affairs Division. And so it reminds me of a conversation that I had frequently with Ryan about similarities, and like on the face of it, AD and cultural affairs are very different, but in terms of having a really diverse line of businesses and stakeholders to serve, that AD is very similar in that way. So we have a lot of unique areas that we serve the arts community here in Arlington. The best way to really understand that is through the Create, Support, and Promote, which is part of our mission. Create. Well, these are the things that we are making as staff here, whether it's through curatorial and creating festivals, concerts, art activations, public art is part of that program as well, although we're sort of rearranging a little bit of that right now internally. So we've been Create. Support. This is probably one of the biggest pieces of what Cultural Affairs does in terms of the grants program, which we administer for the Arts Commission. There is also, which is now $365,000 annually. Recently increased quite a bit thanks to the board last year. We have also a number of facilities that we manage, both at 3700 South 4 Mile Run, which is our home base, but also through joint use facilities in the Arlington Public Schools, at Gunston, Thomas Jefferson, and some new facilities that I'll get to in the next slide. And then we have technical support for staff expertise on theater and scenic design and production, as well as our mobile equipment that goes out and helps service events, both ours and our partners throughout the county. Promote. It wouldn't be an art story if we didn't have something about Arl Now here. That is not, I will say, fortunately, we are mostly in the good stories these days. But that is a big piece of what we do. We have sponsored content that we do with all of our colleagues here in AED. So every week you'll see sponsored content there, and we are able to highlight arts happenings here in the county. We also have a robust social media platform and an e-newsletter that goes out to almost 18,000 subscribers now. So getting the message out in the arts is always probably the hardest part. We have a lot of people focusing on the art itself. How you actually get that out there and sell it is historically one of the biggest challenges. But we want to be a platform to promote all the arts and all the diversity within that. So it's not just things that Cultural Affairs is working on, but we'll pick up other events that are partners in the bids, and partnerships that are also producing as well, and as well as independent. We want to try to develop a tool at some point that will help pick up all of that and be hopefully working with our partners in tourism. But that's just an idea right now, and Kate said, don't talk about that. But we're getting there. Next slide, please. 2700 art space. So if you are familiar with the 3700 campus, directly behind that is another lot that was purchased back in 2021. Used to house the old Ben and Jerry's facility, inner ear recording studio. And then the front end of that had been a number of things. Someone told me it was the original haircuttery business that was started here in Arlington. But that may or may not be true. It's a cool story. That was all here. Those buildings were demolished in, I think it was 22 or 3 at this point, and we are closing in on the installation of this design concept, which was brought here by Graham Projects, a public art and design company that came and did community engagement here and helped us deliver this design. This is, of course, what it'll look like at full maturity. The trees are a little different right now. But construction, we're finishing up on the design elements at this time, the pavement art and some of the other elements here. And landscaping will mature over the winter. We made the planting season. That was a big if with construction. So by late spring, early summer, that will be fully mature and ready to go. What are we doing here? That's a great question. Events, some we hope to be tried and true, things that will be elements of placemaking for this area, but also that we will hope to do some new and innovative things that we can do and export to other parts of the county. And how can we do that? Well, we have the other building and are able to leverage all the other resources within the Cultural Affairs facility, rehearsal spaces, dance studios, a black box theater. Everything that we have there is going to provide us with the opportunity to be more nimble and more innovative in this outdoor space, which we would not have if we were working in just simply a park or any other space we might pick up and set down and do work. So this is the concept, and we hope that by, again, late spring, early summer, we'll be able to do that and start bringing people there. Again, I want to go back to the idea about communication. Anytime you're opening a new space, everyone here knows this, conditioning people that this is where it's happening, you're coming here. So we'll have strategies to do that in terms of regularity of programming, getting on a schedule that identifies repetition, and wayfinding and other elements to bring people here. Again, those are things that we will learn, and we hope will be able to inform our other placemaking work throughout the county. And in addition to 3700, I want to say that there's a lot of other things going on in this area. If you don't spend time there, maybe you've been there to Little League, if you've got a Little Leaguer here, or get your car fixed in that area. Or probably more importantly, the dog park, because again, this is where civic life spends at Arlington at the dog park. Shirlington is the most, not just in Arlington, but in the entire region. People come in here. I see DC plates, Maryland plates. People come here and go to that dog park. It's not insignificant because if otherwise, why else are you going down there? Well, there's the park, the dog park. You're getting your car fixed. So being able to have all those other businesses and going on there, as well as Shirlington, all the businesses that happen right across the footbridge, we think there's enough density of activity that this is not a far-fetched concept, but we will be able to bring people here and work on these new programs. Next slide, please. On the front end of the building for DPR's sports and recreation, so where you would go to get your kids registered for soccer or camp or whatever it was on the front end of our building, about 6,500 square feet of offices there. That has been completely renovated to bring all of the artists from the former LAC, which was the former Lee Art Center, on Langston Boulevard, which is ceramics, printmaking, and a new element, which will be textiles. Textiles come from the former costume lab that the county used to run. And so we are repurposing all of that infrastructure and adding a new program to this. All that will take place on the front end. This is a membership based system. So folks apply and can come in and do, I think we have maybe about 60 or 70 total members at this point. We obviously hope to, by bringing this program here and having all these other activities, be able to grow that membership. But while we're here, one of the things that we're looking to do is to work with Tara and in this launch and be able to bring some small business services to some of the ceramic and printmaking artists. That's who we'll start with, along with some of the other individual artists. Things like taxes, business plans, all the stuff that Tara does and helps with all of our small businesses here. And then also a retail incubator as well, using the gallery and retail space that'll be part of this new infrastructure on the front of our building, but also bringing some of that outdoors to the back of the building where the 2,700 art space will be. So there's a lot of opportunities here across both of these programs for us to work together collaboratively and leverage resources. And again, these are the things, this particular program is something that we hope will be, after the pilot, be able to expand that beyond our ceramic and printmaking artists and start to bring in performing artists and organizations for those same services as well. That's it. I only have 3 slides, but I have questions.
So on this,
Yes.
is this available for use now and how do you sign up for it?
Okay, so we just opened, literally, I think about 2 weeks ago. It is an application process. So it's not an open facility in the sense of, I think at Thomas Jefferson, there Parks runs a program where you can just come in off the street and use the wheel or whatever it is. This is for professional artists. But again, we are trying to grow this program. We hope by having the location a little more integrated into the rest of the arts community that we'll be able to grow that membership. So there is an application, it's online. We're sort of, again, just trying to figure out like key cards and bathrooms right now, but probably by the first of the year, we'll be able to start taking on new applications. You can apply now, but we probably won't start reviewing until the first of the year.
And is there a fee structure
Yes.
contemplated?
Yeah, there's a fee structure for residents and non-residents. Once you're accepted, we're also putting forward a day rate as part of new fees for this year as well. So you're a professional, but maybe you've got something in your house, but there's a piece of equipment that you don't have and you don't think you're going to make use of a full membership, you can come in for a single day and use that. Yes.
This might be going away from the direction, the vision, but have you considered including gaming, as in digital gaming, within the scope? And the reason I say this is that I've seen in certain communities that are trying to, well, first of all, there's this very strong crossover between people from the arts community and gaming, right? The people who make the big games, they're not computer scientists. They're people with arts backgrounds. Musicians, right? From an economic development standpoint, it's very much it's like the music industry, but without all the overhead, right? So it's very hits driven, but if you get that one game that has virality, the economic benefits are huge without having to build a full-on like music studio. In certain communities, they've seen this really drive both a cohesion between the arts community and the technology community. So I'm thinking Savannah in particular, like with SCAD, what they managed to do with the new gaming center there. You saw, obviously you saw a lot of that with South of Market once upon a time. One of my former customers is Zynga. And Zynga was, I mean, they were in like a warehouse in South of Market. And then they got like Mafia Wars or Farmville, and it was through the roof. And
Farmville, guilty.
yeah, well, I know far, I know far, Mark Pincus and I spent a lot of time in rooms. I learned far too much about their business model. But the net of it is we're talking 90% plus gross margins and best analogy he once told me was, it's like being a casino where you can never take money out. So the reason I say all that is from an economic development perspective, it's relatively low investment to do gaming, digital gaming, but the economic upside could be huge. And I don't know if there's a potential to kind of bring gamers into this.
Yeah, so I know that, I can't speak to a lot of that, but I do know that some of the conversations we had with folks from Virginia Tech have been in and around that area. And so I would want to talk to some of my other colleagues about that and where that is now in terms of their efforts here. But I will say, as someone who is rooted in events and activations, like I love the idea of being able to bring gamers together and actually game. And, you know, there are all kinds of things with that now. I can't believe that they have concerts now that are based entirely on that. You know, there is a whole audience out there that was frankly not there 10 years ago. At least at this level and in these different areas, particularly around music as well. So
I think George, if Paula were here, she might remind us that George Mason has a fairly big gaming development center down in Prince William County.
Okay.
But that's far enough away that there's nothing like that closer in. But they do substantial game development down there, studio development, et cetera, under the George Mason, banner. But again, it's in Prince William County, so.
And how old is that? Because I want to say that
Maybe 10 years.
I think I've been here long enough, and I remember when there was a conversation about maybe that being here in Arlington, with there was a conversation around a community benefit and bringing together arts in that world. So it didn't happen, but.
We'll invite Paula to make a comment if she's on, but piggybacking off of Tim's comments, I think that's a really interesting observation, maybe something we should revisit. Heard a stat, maybe someone can fact check me. The gaming industry is as large or larger than Hollywood.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Which blew my mind. And my youngest is in her Zelda phase. These are full-blown movies and they're works of art. It is storytelling at its best. It's incredible. And so maybe piggybacking off of this, for the art center that we have in Arlington, is there any space or infrastructure dedicated to digital art? And the answer could be no, and that's okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
So I think that's an area for exploration for sure.
Yeah.
So
I can just-
Fuse is partially designed to support digital art as well. And if you have had the opportunity to tour the labs here, there is digital art space. Also, Virginia Serious Game Institute, even though they're in Prince William County, we bring them here to Arlington to work with us as well. In fact, we're working with all 3 counties that are along the innovation corridor, Arlington, Fairfax, and Prince William counties on a consumer electronics show booth that displays Northern Virginia, and the Serious Game Institute is working with us on making that an interactive booth.
Thank you, Paula. Meredith, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just I was struck and excited by the retail incubator, right? So like, how are we finding works of art by local artists that we can engage with in that community connectivity? And then also struck by your comments on how do we make sure that Arlingtonians know that this is here and support it and interact with it. One potential idea, and we want to keep sort of the focus is on supporting our professional artists here in the county. But one idea to connect more Arlingtonians and young people to it would be to partner with schools and have there be APS field trips of art classes to the Artisan Accelerator to also just know that it's there, but also to maybe create. And I raised this mother of 4 in Arlington Public Schools, and every holiday season, their art class comes up with something. And then you have the option of going online and ordering their art on a coffee cup, on a bag, on whatever. And that money is going to a company outside of Arlington. but we're all excited about what our children are making. So maybe finding a way to explore whether the studios could host our young people. Also, the 2700 art space, the external space for performance, having young people also be invited to perform there rather than in. I love our theaters that we have within our public schools, but it's a different way that they can bring their art to the community and bring more people into the art space as well.
Provides a different level of experience and insight into the world of that creative world of arts as an industry and as a potential career. So it means something different to be on an actual stage in a commercial setting.
Yeah.
So that experience has been valuable. But yeah, we've had some conversations about the idea of some of the artists here opening up more commissions. So to your point about potentially being able to transfer ideas from either students or just consumers here in Arlington to be able to have that sense of uniqueness and ownership in transferring their idea to an original piece.
Well, Josh, thank you for that overview of CAD. It spurred some interesting conversation, definitely that we can follow up on. So thank you very much. You. Now, Sarah.
Our Theater Washington guests to come on up. While they're taking their seats, I really wanted to do a panel with Theater Washington. I recently attended an advocacy workshop with Theater Washington where they went over the data that you'll see in this report on your in front of you. And I was so impressed by this. This was just released. And so it really shows the economic impact specifically of theater in an area. But it's, I think probably you could spread it. You could look at it as performing arts in general to an area, which it's great. I'll just say a couple words about me. I'm Sarah Barker. You all know me. I sit here on the commission. I'm a producing artistic director of Avant-Garde Theater here in Arlington. I'm also co-president of Embracing Arlington Arts, which is a advocacy nonprofit in Arlington as well. And in addition to that, I'm a federal employee. I work right next door at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. So I always tell people, yes, I have both sides of my brain working at all times. It's a lot of fun. But on that note, I do want to just make a plug for the arts for those of us who aren't necessarily arts focused in our day-to-day. It is something that can really bring an innovative mindset when you start, feeling like, okay, I need to think outside of the box about something. Go see a show, I'll say. But with that, I do want our guests to introduce themselves. So for this, Michelle Pendelet, she's a Theater Washington board member and founder and principal of Penn Communications. Then we have Nathan Ainspan, Theater Washington board and DoD senior research psychologist. And finally, we have Catherine Ross, Theater Washington advancement manager. And if you all want to just take a few minutes to say a few more things about yourselves, I'd be happy for you to.
So thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to the commission for having us today. I am Michelle, and in addition to being a board member at Theater Washington, I'm also an Arlington resident. I've lived in Arlington for 20 years. I got married at the Arlington Art Center, now MoCA. Also 20 years ago, I launched my small business from my home in Arlington. And one of my very first clients was Cinetic Theater. So Arlington arts and culture has a lot to do with my life. Like you, Sarah, I have the technical side as well. I am married to a computer scientist who works for the federal government as well. So got both sides of my brain as well. But again, I'm here today, not just as an Arlington resident, but as someone who really believes that the performing arts mean business can mean business. And I'm really excited because Theater Washington, in its capacity as an alliance of professional theaters across the region, has just completed its first economic overview of theater in the region. So what we're going to be talking about today has a lot to do with how in specific theaters can support community, what the state of theater in Arlington looks like, and how we can partner to create an environment that works for artists, audiences, and communities while also driving economic impact. And I want to introduce the co-authors of this report and the brains behind the operation, truly. Catherine Ross is the advancement manager at Theater Washington and a co-author of the paper. And Dr. Nate Ainspan is a volunteer with Theater Washington, but in your day job, you crunch numbers and volunteered your time to help us understand the economic impact. So it's also a beautiful story about volunteerism in Arlington. And Nate, you want to say a little bit more about yourself? You're also an Arlington resident.
South Arlington, West Village of Shirlington, off a 4-mile run drive. I do work for the Department of Defense as a research psychologist for the office that helps the members become civilians. And I can hear the lawyers in my head, so they do want me to say I'm here on my personal time, in my personal capacity, so I don't get in any trouble. And I lived in Arlington when I got out of undergraduate school in the 90s, and I actually saw Signature Theater when they started in the garage. And then in Gunston, then in the garage. I left to go to grad school. And then even then I'd keep coming back to Arlington where I had friends. But then when I was job searching and networking and would make a point to continue to go to Signature, we bought our house to be near Signature after driving by the complex when we were going back to our rental place, and developed my family. I have a son who's now in HP Woodlawn and a junior who's taken part in arts groups that I can explain later. And arts have been an important part of my life. I'm married to a historian who's also into it, who I was pleased to know wasn't aware of all the rich tapestry of all the cultural institutions before she met me. She just thought of theater as Kennedy Center, Arena Stage, did not know about all these smaller companies, a bunch of which are in Arlington, and has been pleased to go on a learning expedition with me. Previously, before I was a judge with the Helen Hayes Award sponsored by Theater Washington, and my interests are psychology, but also in my day job, I do economic analysis and demographics, and was really interested in showing the numbers that demonstrate the business of theater, because we know theater can develop empathy, draws community, but there's also business to it. And to illustrate the economic impact that theater can have. And then we're fortunate that we have the advocacy efforts to get this information out. And this is one of the first public audiences that's seeing this data. It was released to the theater community, but this is the first external organization. And we're just very excited that we can now show with hard numbers, incontrovertible evidence, the impact that the theater can have for our communities.
I'm Catherine Ross. I'm the advancement manager for Theater Washington. I ended up at Theater Washington. I started out as an artist. I moved down here after I graduated from college. I was a stage manager. Now I'm a properties artisan full-time because I had a child and I can't be in the theater from 5 to 10 p.m. every night anymore. But ultimately what that means is that I'm a storyteller. And in my role in advancement, I tell stories to investors, funders, partners. And the story I'm telling is not, the narrative that's trying to pull you into empathy on the stage, but it's about why we should care about those stories being told. I am also a data wonk because numbers tell stories. So when Nathan reached out to me and was like, what can we be looking at? I was like, yes. I spend a lot of time looking at, information from the Doris Duke Foundation, SMU Data Arts, AFTA, and the studies that they do are all these big, sweeping, the state of nonprofits, the state of the arts, national. And that's helpful for understanding in context our own spaces. But what our theaters and our performing arts organizations really need is how to talk about themselves. And so this project was really born out of wanting to give our artists tools for their own advocacy while we also engage in that conversation with people like yourselves. So we are very proud of it. We're very excited about it. We're happy to be here today.
Thank you so much.
I think we can go to the first and second slide. We'll zip through really quickly. So now that we've introduced ourselves, I want to make sure that everyone here understands who Theater Washington is. Theater Washington is the alliance of the 89 professional theaters in the DMV. You may not know, some of you may know. The region is second only to New York in the number of productions, the number of theater seats annually. And that adds up. People come here for theater, but we also have a community that is deeply engaged. So Theater Washington's role is to represent and engage and support and promote the ecosystem, the entire theater ecosystem. We're probably best known for the Helen Hayes Awards. Has anyone here been to a Helen Hayes Awards event? Yeah. Okay. It is like the Tony Awards for regional theater. It's a fantastic show, and it is also a major fundraiser. But we're also known for Theater Week, which is like the restaurant week for theaters. We sell tens of thousands of tickets to theaters across the region. And we also run programs that support theater makers, artists in times of need. But again, today we are talking about, next slide, please. In our role as a capacity builder, the report that we just completed. So we're talking about how theaters contribute to local economies, but we also took some time before we came here today to take a look specifically at theater in Arlington and what that looks like. And I want to say again that today we're talking about theater, but all of us are arts people in some degree, and the theater data is a very good avatar for the performing arts as a whole. So I think, again, Theater Washington, we're focused on theater, but really this is a story about the way that we can use the arts, all arts, to drive economic results.
Catherine, do you want to say a little bit about the 30,000 view of what theater can bring to a community?
Yeah, so ultimately, we'll get to the economic impact, but the bigger picture is that theater creates people who don't, this is going to sound terrible, people who don't suck. If you walk away with anything else today, don't tell Amy I said that. They'll put it on the t-shirt, yeah, theater. Ultimately, theater asks you to sit for 2 hours in a space and engage with someone else's story. And there's study after study after study that proves that that matters, that building empathy in that way matters, and that sitting next to people in the dark in an engaged space that's not your living room matters. So those spaces, though, are not just like empathy builders, they're placemakers, because they're what we call third spaces, right? It's not your house, it's not your work. It's a space you are going to engage in community, to share an experience that you will then talk about with other people in your community, because that is a shared experience. It is a place that you will see the coffee from the business down the street in the lobby, because you are building a community anchor point. So it is making better people who are curious about other people. It is about placemaking and identity, that sort of anchor building on the street that you walk to after you have dinner next door, to see a show, to stay for a talk back, to engage in conversation about the thing you just saw. It's also educational access. We know that arts in schools have been under fire for literally my entire life. So our theater organizations, the 89 companies that Michelle talked about, a third of them run also educational programs. And those educational programs reach over 10,000 students a year. And that's not including the adult programs. That's just kids under 18. And for a lot of people, that is their first taste of performing arts. And what we know is that there's already data coming out about sort of what COVID is going to do to the performing arts as a career, because we have a whole cohort of students who spent 3 years when they're normally take a field trip to the Kennedy Center, when they normally get that first trip to Folger Theater to see A Christmas Carol, when, you know, one of our smaller puppet companies comes to their show. That didn't happen for 3 years. And what does that gap mean? It means that there's about 30,000 kids who didn't have that experience, and who, not for any fault of their parents' own, but aren't necessarily getting it somewhere else. So these theater organizations are building audiences, building that engaged citizenry we talked about, to the tune of like hundreds of thousands of kids every, 5 to 10 years. And that is no small number of people, good people who don't suck. Economically, though, which is what I'm super stoked about this report for, we looked at economic, we looked at 990 data, because over 90% of the theaters in this area are nonprofits, which is unique to DC. Chicago has a much higher, so there's 4 big theater organization cities. New York, DC, Chicago, and LA are the big 4. We have the highest rate of nonprofit theater companies of those different spaces. The majority of our companies are nonprofits, a very small handful are LLCs. Those nonprofits hold over $1 billion in combined assets. That's buildings, but that's also cash, that's endowments. They create $160 million in earned and contributed revenue. And they put almost $190 million in expenditures directly back into the community, of which about 42% on average for each company is salaries. It's paying people, it's paying artists and technicians and the people who make it happen. That's roughly 4,000 employees over the region. And when we say the region, we're saying it's about, we use our service areas about a 30-mile radius from downtown DC. So that's to about Annapolis, a little bit beyond Herndon, and 5,100 volunteers. That's a lot of artists and creators. We also discovered and learned that for every dollar of public funding, that's grants and support from everything from county to federal, there's a $3 to $5 ROI. And in terms of direct expenditure correlation. So for every dollar coming in, we're seeing $3 to $5 coming out of that organization back into very specifically the local economy.
Thank you so much. I want to turn to Nate and Catherine as well. If you want to look at Arlington specifically with this data in mind.
Start with the macro and now the micro.
Sure. Macro, there are 7 professional theater organizations in Arlington. I know you all probably know Signature, but there's 2 others. Last year at the Helen Hayes Awards, previously mentioned, 3 different theater companies from Arlington received nominations. One of them was Cinetic, which is what we consider a mid-size organization, and the other was Avant Bard, who is one of our smaller theater companies. There are more than 700 W-2s that go out from Arlington County every year to theater makers, and over 1,000 volunteers, and more than $8.5 million in earned income. One of the things that I find really fascinating is that of the entire region, not just Arlington, we have 2 of the largest theater education programs for youth. So Encore and ETC are both Arlington organizations, and they're in the top 4 of the arts education for youth in the entire region, not just here in Virginia. One of the things I found interesting was that more than 10% of our regional theater audiences were from Arlington. Comparatively, 20% of them are from Montgomery County, and they're 4 times as large as y'all are. So there's a real contingent here of people who are interested and care about the arts, and a really great breadth of arts organizations, theater organizations that sort of define that ecosystem up and down.
And then I was asked to talk about myself, not just as a researcher, psychologist, economist, analyst, but also as an individual, as an Arlingtonian, and a parent of what this means. So we've seen throughout history, and there's recent research that shows that educated, high-quality employees, the employees that the companies want to hire with degrees, with education, can choose where they want to live. And culture and theater is frequently a big choice of where they want to go. Throughout history, it's always been the major economic cities that bring in the people and bring in the culture, and those are very interwoven closely. And then the benefits that the programs can provide for education for children. I'm an example of that because I was living in Arlington in the 90s when I was just out of undergraduate school. When I got my degree, I made a point of coming back to this area and moved to Arlington because of the culture, because of the restaurants, because of the theater. And then my wife and I would go from our rental in North Arlington, driving down to Shirlington to see Signature when they were established there. When it came time for us to buy a house because we had a son, we saw that neighborhood, we bought the West Village. And my son has gone to Encore theater camps in the summer and in the winter for going about 5 years. I've read the psychological research of what theater can do. I believe it developed empathy in me. My wife and I were able to connect through it, but then I saw it in my son. As he went through these theater programs, I saw him become more self-confident, more socially connected to people, more empathetic, more understanding, and the experiences that he got. And again, it was a very powerful thing that we could find a camp close to us. We weren't schlepping into DC to the Kennedy Center every day in the summer or in the winter, but literally for us, it was right across the street, and that he could partake in that so easily, enjoy it and grow. And the experiences it provided him were incalculable, including one time when he was practicing his sword fighting from Romeo and Juliet for an fighting camp that they had in the background while my wife was on a Zoom call with her work. We're still paying for that. But I can just see how it's affected his life, how it's affected us by having this nearby. And in addition to the economic benefit, the placemaking that the theater does, the one thing that the data we've seen that illustrate what we intuitively know is the theater here is a community. And it's a community that isn't just the actors and the artistic people. The fact that I'm involved with Theater Washington when I'm not an artist, not a designer, not a performer, but just someone who loves theater, that doesn't exist. I've lived in New York and Chicago, and that doesn't exist in those other cities. And just as one personal example, there was one actor who's active in Signature, Bobby Smith, who got injured badly, couldn't perform for a while. We read about that. We actually made a donation to him through the Signature Theater and also sent cards to him. He may not know us from the thousands of people he performed in, but we felt connected to him. And then when we saw him at the Harris Theater in Shirlington, where we also shopped when he was back, we talked to him and welcomed him back and complimented the work that he had done. And so in addition to the ROI, the financial argument, our placemaking, understand that there's also a very strong qualitative element, that we have a really integrated, powerful community and an ecosystem that we'll get into that really makes this an attractive place that will draw more people in and the kind of educated, high-income people that we want to see in a community and be able to employ.
And if I could just chime in here, go off script a bit. Arlington is working with fantastic cultural resources. I don't want that to get lost in this conversation. Josh gave a presentation about the breadth of work that Arlington is doing. That is not for nothing. So I'm of the opinion that Arlington is sitting on a gold mine of potential with its arts and theater spaces in particular. Because of what you talked about, right? The strength of the ecosystem and the community that is already there, just waiting to be leveraged and harnessed.
Yeah, so if we can, I don't know. If the
We
next slide
can
is-
probably go to the next slide.
Yeah. So I would like to talk about those challenges and, the flip side of every challenge is an opportunity. So specifically in Arlington, I can attest to other theater companies that have recently needed to find other spaces because they lost their space right here in Arlington. So can we have that hard conversation?
Yeah, space is everyone's concern ultimately. And part of the issue with space is that these organizations, we have 6 what we call itinerant theater companies in Arlington, meaning they do not have a home. It is not their, they bounce between some of the high schools, Jefferson being a great example. They perform at Against an Art Center. They are moving around. In comparison, we have, I know I pulled Montgomery County for comparison, but there's 12 companies there, but only 3 are itinerant. And half of those companies are in government supported and subsidized spaces. There's downtown in Silver Spring, the Theater Consortium of Silver Spring, which has 4 resident companies. And we have 2 companies with long-term leases in Glen State Park. And they are all sort of, the space has been subsidized. They are run, the buildings are run by separate organizations, by arts organizations, but they are supported in it's really true partnership with local government. We would seek that, I think, here. It's this understanding that I think the answer to space, which there just is not for some of these organizations who, I'm going to go on my little spiel. I'm sorry, Michelle. Theaters don't want to run and own buildings, most theater organizations. They want to make art. And so the needs of a theater space are very specific and very hard to find. The infrastructure that makes a space valuable for production is hard to find. There are companies that do beautiful work in site-specific theater outdoors at like 2,700. But a theater space, which takes hundreds of thousands of dollars and years to kind of build with the lighting and the sound equipment and whatever, the smaller companies, that whole ecosystem we were talking about, it's not attainable for them to fund, even, I mean, with aid from organizations. So those spaces, I am of the mindset that they need to exist apart from, you know, the big institutional anchors that we require to sort of help create the other end of that ecosystem. So having spaces for theater to happen is a unique thing. You can have an improv class in an empty room, but you can't have a theater production in an empty room. You can have a paint night in an empty room, but you can't have a theater production in an empty room. So building space for theater to happen is something that is our largest challenge. And I think the largest challenge here and what we've seen elsewhere is that it does not happen when we ask the theaters to do it just for themselves. The organizations are not equipped to do it. That's the answer.
They don't have that infrastructure. I will say on the flip side, on the opportunity side, with adaptive reuse, we're currently looking at a potential in Crystal City, National Landing, there is a theater there. Would the developer, it sounds like the developer is open to at least having the conversation of activating it and potentially even building out a small performing arts space there. So I will say that these conversations are happening. We hope they happen with an end. In Arlington, we've had lots of maybes, going down the road. There was the opportunity for Virginia Square, there being a black box theater there. It went way down the road. We almost got it. And in the end of the day, the developer there contributed a certain amount of money to Arlington County instead of building out that black box theater. So embracing Arlington Arts has been on this trail for a few years now, trying to find an opportunity that comes to fruition.
Well, and that's so interesting when developers offer incentives or offsets. If you think about what that offset could grow into when invested in the arts. So if you're saying $1 generates $3, well, that one-off payment could generate quite a bit more over time. I will also say, and this is included in the white paper that I believe will be included in the notes. I will also say that the more a theater grows, the more it's going to return. You will get back so much more than what you put in, not just in terms of the strengthening the fabric of the community, but in terms of real dollars. So at the very, very highest end of the scale, the big guys are returning about $9 per $1 invested. But that does not mean that we should only be focusing on the big guys. In fact, quite the opposite, because the big guys rely on some of the smaller and mid-sized theaters to feed and develop the ecosystem.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And the long-term thinking there,
Yeah,
the investment is the important point, I think.
We dropped the word ecosystem in this conversation. It comes out in the paper. And what that means is it's the small, medium, large scale theaters, and they're all important. It's like a natural ecosystem is you have the small fish, and then the middle-sized fish can eat those. And what we see is there's small theaters that a lot of the younger people will start, they cut their teeth, and the designers as well. And in addition, the small theaters are ones that really will do amazing work, that will reinterpret an old play like a Shakespeare or work with new writers. And then the middle theaters are, after about 5-7 years, they build a reputation, they're starting to move on, starting to expand, but they're still being innovative. And then eventually they can grow into something like a Signature, a Kennedy Center. And even then, a lot of times the Signature will draw into a smaller company to bring in talent, to share supplies, to share technology, to share art ideas and the ecosystem ideas. These are all working together, and the system would die were it not for all the parts that are moving and interacting. And henceforth, we really push that the small theater should be funded just to keep the ecosystem managing and working and acting together.
And something that we did not include in the white paper, but is germane to this conversation is that the $1 equals $3, the inputs, outputs, that's only for direct investment. That is not counting the money that is spent on parking, babysitting, dinner, the ancillary, the indirect spending that comes as a result of a night out. The national average is about $38 for every one ticket purchased, one seat purchased. So there is real potential to start building a model. And Arlington is such a beautiful place to start because we're all analytical and in our own ways to be able to articulate what is the economic value of investing in the arts. And so when I think about the opportunity here, I am looking, I specialize, I'm an arts manager, but I specialize in marketing communications. Catherine is a storyteller. I see a story of opportunity. I see that we are in a place that is so well educated and so arts inclined to begin with, disproportionately so. And I am also seeing a region that is going through a tremendous amount of cultural change right now, particularly within the city. Northern Virginia has a much smaller proportion of performing arts spaces and opportunities as compared to our cousins in Montgomery County. We are beautifully positioned to be drawing people into Arlington to experience the performing arts. I see a true opportunity to bring money into the county simply by leveraging the resources that are already there.
Do we have another slide? Yep. And I know we're really running up against time, so I apologize. Do we have time for a question or two? Do we?
Yeah, we'd love to leave room for questions, but
Great, yeah.
I don't know if you want to wrap up on this slide.
Yeah, I will simply say, because I think we've covered quite a bit of this already, is that investing in the arts it should not be a subsidy. And that we have a real opportunity to work together with within the theater ecosystem. Again, not individual theaters, but through alliances and coalitions to be like Embracing Arlington Arts, to be thoughtful about what our desired outcomes are. I would say theaters are great at playing roles. We play well with others, we play roles. So if Arlington sets a vision, I strongly suspect that theaters will get in line, but Arlington actually already has a cultural strategy. It has a good cultural strategy. I think what this report does is lay the groundwork for talking about the metrics and the measurement, right? So not just clarifying the vision, but clarifying the desired outcomes, the metrics, how we're going to measure success.
Great. I'd love to open this up for questions. This is very engaging, very thought-provoking. Catherine.
Thank you. One thing I heard loud and clear is that space is a challenge. You talked about itinerant theater companies. Can you talk a little bit more about the challenges of owning a theater space? I can guess that it's analogous to movie theaters where you've got a box that's primarily used during certain hours of the day. You've got parking challenges. Can you talk a little bit more about that stuff? Because I'm sure live theater is obviously different than a movie theater.
Sure. So you have the larger theaters that run their space all the time. They generally have, they're using their space all day. They've got educational programs coming in, but the smaller theaters use black box spaces. And those spaces are rented generally on a show by show basis. Those theater companies aren't necessarily, one of the disconnects we see in developers' conversations with theater makers is that developers are saying, well, how much can you pay a month in rent? And theater makers are saying, we budgeted $10,000 in rent for this show that runs these 8 weeks. And it's just a different conversation and a different way of thinking about resources. And so what happens is you end up with these spaces that are used generally in the evenings, generally from 5 to 11:30 p.m. And they're used by organizations that are not interested in necessarily managing a facility and don't have the capacity and scale to. So you're looking for someone to manage a facility that then you have to figure out what it is being used for during the day. We've seen really successful activations for things like kids' dance classes, et cetera, in those daytime spaces. But it is challenging because it's specialized equipment in a specialized space. And you need people managing it who speak the language of the companies who are using it, which is unique and specific.
If I could say a little bit about
someone who runs one of those.
Yes, for sure. But also embracing Arlington Arts. Our vision for a small performing arts center in Arlington would be a space that would be fully activated as much as possible. So we've already put out there in our plan that if a theater company would like to use it, they have to commit to having a set that can be stowed away so that other groups can activate that space when it's dark for that theater company. It's not something all the theaters love, and there are some that said, no, I'm not interested. But in order to make it economically viable, in order to make a space fully activated as possible, that's what Embracing Arlington Arts sees as a condition. So looking at this potential space, in Crystal City, we have the National Conservatory of Dramatic Arts that's currently located in Georgetown, very interested in being an anchor tenant there. So if there was rehearsal studio space there, they would use that as classrooms. We also have potentially a music performing arts organization interested in teaching classes there. So I think really that partnership between education organizations and theaters is what can make it a viable space. But also we've seen many times churches coming in on Sundays for theater spaces. So yeah, we're very open to thinking outside the box to actually make this space as fully utilized as possible.
And compared to movie theaters that you mentioned, the economics of running a theater are actually much harder. Because all your costs are front loaded and you don't get your money till later. So you have to build the sets, sign up and pay the actors during rehearsal, pay for the scripts and everything. But then you don't get the money until after you open, and then that comes over time. I've been on the board of theaters and it is very hard. And especially if you have to handle real estate with all the costs and cleaning, electricity and heating, that's all happening in the summer. You're paying the bills, but you're not running any shows and you're designing them. Do you want to give Signature as an example of their startup? Okay.
Yeah, you can. Signature is a little bit different than what we would look at though, just because what we would really, and maybe you want to talk about the Silver Spring Black Box Consortium, because what we would look at is a separate nonprofit actually running the space, right? Not an individual theater.
Yeah, so the consortium is set up. It is the Theater Consortium of the Silver Spring. It's its own 501c3. The building is owned by Montgomery County, but the consortium is literally, it's 2 staff members whose job it is to manage the building and help the 4 resident companies. They also run outside rentals. So it's those 4 companies that are in residency that have primary claim over sort of essentially the performance calendar of the space. But then there's up to, I think last year there were 35 other individual renters for one-off weekends, for daytime use. They have 3 workshops in the basement, managing and doing that sort of administrative overhead that those theater companies do not have the capacity to do, as they are trying to make art on a budget of less than $300,000 a year.
Also technical equipment.
Yes,
That
and the
might
equipment is owned
soundboard
by.
that are owned rather than have to be paid for each show.
Really interesting. Thank you.
Sarah and panelists, thank you for making the time to share this with us. This is a great agenda item. It reminded me that the DC metro area is one of the 4 powerhouses with respect to theater. And so this is a regional differentiator for us. And it occurred to me that this is, one of the few things, like dwindling list of things that brings people together in a live format, in a shared experience, in many respects, no different than sports, right? And so as we think about, and it's also similar in the sense that you've got little leagues, right? And you've got like AAA and leads up to the big leagues, and the economics are associated with that. And like that, the community supports athletics with fields, right? And so I think that's a great framing as we think about economic development for the county. I think there are a lot of additional conversations that could be had about this. And so I think that is a good lead in for, some of our potential next year agenda items. But why don't we give our guests a round of applause? Okay, thank you guys. This was a great discussion around arts. We're going to move into some business updates for some of our working advisory groups. And I'll just take a quick minute to note that in this current environment, as the economy is changing, as work is being changed by AI and all the technology that's happening, you can make a very strong argument that creativity is more valuable than ever before, right? And so as we think about arts and economic development, those things are connected, right? And so I think thinking of it as an investment in the future as opposed to subsidy in terms of how our guests framed it, I think is really important backdrop for the type of work that we're trying to do. So with that, let's move on. I'm going to turn it over to Matt for the comprehensive plan update.
Sure, I'll be very, very fast since we're running up against time. So the county had a meeting last week about the comprehensive plan update. As some of you may know, the comprehensive plan is the overarching policy document for the county, has 12 elements, including the general land use plan, master transportation plan, public arts, all of that. And by law, the county is required to update it every 5 years. But this effort's focused on updating the introductory chapter of the comprehensive plan, which hasn't been updated since the 60s. So this is being viewed as a way to really reframe the vision for Arlington County and what our values are today. It's been a very abstract discussion so far. So we've talked about guiding principles and how they fit in with certain planning principles. And we last met in April, I believe. And since then, the county took in a bunch of feedback from the community about what they want to see. And, they're talking about a livable built environment, harmony with nature, and then relevant for us, resilient economy, people were talking about job access and workforce development. So I think one opportunity for us is think about, from our commission's perspective and AED generally, like what sort of principles or goals or vision do we have that we might want to see in this document? There's been no actual text drafted yet. It's been a lot of just discussion. And, this has become a bit of a flashpoint outside of our area of focus, but it's been a flashpoint with housing. Some folks see this as a way to open the conversation for more density outside the corridors, meaning that if there's language in the introductory chapter about additional housing, more density, or however they frame it, that could lead to future county decisions dealing with the redevelopment. So that's where one side of the discussion is. And, the housing advocates kind of agree and they see this as an opportunity as well. So that's the real political flashpoint in this. But the upshot is, we have an opportunity to provide some feedback if we want about what we'd want to include in this introductory chapter. We might see some text early next year about what's in the introductory chapter rewrite. Again, I haven't seen any of that so far. And the county might get this approved next spring, give or take. So stay tuned. Right now, it's not a very concrete exercise, but I think we have an opportunity if we want to include some messaging about economic development.
Matt, what's the process for, so if once things are recommended by the working group, does it go in front of
The board will have to approve it next year.
Okay.
Will there be an opportunity between now and sort of when the final recommendations are made where if there are several of us that want to sort of sit in and attend a meeting and?
Yeah, so I think we'll have a meeting early next year. So if it's open to the public. So.
Yeah, if you could maybe find that for us, I'd love to.
Yeah. And Matt, if we wanted to propose language as a commission, what would the timing of that be?
So they've had public feedback through, I think, yesterday, but as a commission, we can always write, I think, feedback at any point. So certainly could do, I would recommend doing it in the next month or two. If they're putting together a draft by January, February.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Evan, moving on to you for transportation updates.
So similar to what Matt described for the overarching Arlington Comprehensive Plan, continue to be the EDC representative on the Transportation Future Advisory Group. And this is specifically focused on Arlington's transportation plan and identifying goals and shaping policies for the future of transportation in Arlington. Caitlin kindly sent around yesterday some of the attachments, the exhibits that have been created that sort of flesh out these policy recommendations and a draft network plan. We're getting into the nitty gritty at this point. You can see right now the draft curb lane use categories. And Caitlin, if you want to flip up the next one. They've also identified there's an interactive map that's been created where it's the pedestrian network interactive map that's on the website. There's also policies for how to prioritize curb space and these pedestrian networks. And if you have time and interest, please, go through these. There's a Word document that was also sent out. That's my homework assignment that has specific questions I'm supposed to use to solicit feedback from all of you, particularly some of the business owners. There's some stuff in there about, what should be the focus, what's the most important priority? Is it pedestrians moving along the sidewalk? Is it goods delivery? Is it access to businesses? There's some stuff you can get back to me on, just if you yay or nay, you like it, you don't like it, you think something's overemphasized or underemphasized. The deadline for me to report back to the advisory group is December 3rd. So you've got a couple of weeks. I know that includes Thanksgiving to noodle on it, but if you have thoughts you want to share, particularly from an economic development angle, this is a good time to weigh in. So, thanks. Thanks, Caitlin.
So we're going to have 3 homework assignments, right? So we'll follow up, Caitlin, after this. We'll solicit feedback on comprehensive plan and potentially propose some language. We'll also send out a reminder for transportation plan update commentary. And then the last item, which we had raised at the end of the meeting, is areas of interest for next year. I think today a number of items came up organically. And so that'll be the 3rd homework assignment to solicit some feedback in advance of our December meeting to make sure that next year's agenda reflects what our membership wants to cover. Nick, anything else on that?
No.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much and have a great Thanksgiving.
Yep.